Hi, in this video, I want to talk about emotional sobriety. Emotional sobriety. Okay. I'm just gonna give you the punchline. Before I even explain anything, I think for me, the opposite of being cluster B, the opposite is not being more vulnerable or acting like, really like a lamb or acting like really, really loving. I think that that's kind of like enacting. I think that's almost like enacting like an ideal. Yeah, I do think the opposite of cluster B would be something much more like less activated. Okay, I do think so, but I don't think it'll necessarily be like we'll become these like really idealized, wonderful, vulnerable, loving people. I think that's a nice way to think, but I think the real antidote or the real not being narcissistic or not being cluster B, I guess like the opposite, or I think the real opposite is really just being emotionally sober. Okay, emotionally sober. Okay. So I think there's a big difference between how we feel when we hear the word sober, okay, being sober, as opposed to being vulnerable and lovey-dovey, or caring and compassionate. Um, I challenge people, when you hear, people repeating like, "Oh, he's so compassionate, he's so caring, he's so empathetic," and it's almost repeated a little too intensely, and you wonder if is that really a sober is that really the image of a sober person? You know what I mean? Like maybe sometimes it is, but I think it's also kind of a sentimental it's kind of a sentimental image, and I think we need to be careful that, there's a difference between having real emotions in life, okay, and the sentimental caricature of what is emotionality, okay. Real emotions is not the same thing as emotionality, okay. And so I think sometimes, in the public media, just in pop culture, and also in psychology, and psychology is deeply infected by this problem. Infected, okay. Where instead of presenting really more of something closer to real emotional sobriety, okay, I think they are flirting a little bit too much with this kind of like idealized image of the very compassionate, very like super compassionate, super empathetic, kind of almost like an ideal, okay, which may not look anything like emotional sobriety. Okay, now emotional sobriety is not a flat line. Okay, emotional sobriety is not the psychopath. You know what I mean? The psychopath is that's a false sobriety. That's a pseudo sobriety. Okay. Because that's not a sobriety that's achieved through living and burdening yourself with all the environmental taxes. Okay. The psychopath achieves a pseudo sobriety by not plugging in and not assuming all the burdens of their environment. Okay. So we need to understand that, in this world where we idealize, different states, like say sobriety, or let's say the ideal empathic, emotional, compassionate, whatever, we always have to understand there's a difference between the actual presentation and the pseudo presentation. Okay. So I'm not talking about like a pseudo sobriety. I'm talking about actual sobriety. You know what I mean? So I guess the reason why psychology might be afraid to put sobriety, emotional sobriety ahead of like say the compassionate ideal, like the ideal empathic, caring person. Um, I think maybe there's a fear, okay, that sobriety might entail a kind of like almost like a psychopathic like indifference. You know what I mean? Because like you're too neutral, and I think we have to be careful because in the narcissism of our world, even the narcissism of psychology, I think there is a little bit of fear that actual sobriety might be too neutral, so neutral that it almost means you're not caring. You know what I mean? But I actually think that real emotions and real caring actually does look more neutral than the way it's portrayed in the ideal of the super empath, or like say the super compassionate, you know. And I do propose that, when it gets repeated too much, being so compassionate, so caring, it's almost like a cheerleading kind of thing. I actually think that's got a little bit too much cheering in it, and I don't think that's really sobriety. Okay, I think sobriety does appear more neutral. Okay, But in reality, it just appears that way because you have to live it. Okay. And I think that real sobriety actually is the real emotions. Okay. Is emotions that aren't performed. Okay. It's emotions that aren't trying to, like signal their virtue. You know what I mean? And I think we have to be careful because I think there's a big instinct we have, and it is, I think, the more immature part of us to sort of like just unconsciously kind of signal this tremendous virtue as opposed to actually just being real. Okay, actually just being present, actually feeling things as opposed to having emotionality, which is the performance of feeling. Okay. And I think we have to really be careful because I don't think even psychology has figured out so far the difference between real emotions and the performance of emotions. Okay. The expected emotions versus real emotions. Okay. I think real emotions actually do seem kind of neutral to a person who's caught up in the ideal of emotionality. All right. I think real emotions will appear a little bit too kind of like deadpan. You know, in reality, it's not deadpan at all, but it just doesn't have that performative dimension. You know what I mean? So I think personally, I think that a person who gets the instinct towards sobriety, real sobriety, I think they will run into problem with a lot of therapists and a lot of psychologists who will perceive it to be a little too neutral, a little too detached, a little too not fully, the ideal of emotions, because there is narcissism in psychology also. Okay, a little bit too idealized. This kind of put up on a pedestal the idea of being, super compassionate, super empathic, super vulnerable. Even the idea of being super vulnerable, I'm not sure I buy it. I think there's something a little bit fetish about that, a little bit of a fetish, a little bit too idealized, I think. You know, not in any way am I saying we should be super defended. Okay, I just think that sometimes we exaggerate vulnerability, as we expect it to be. And I think in real life, I think people aren't that idealized. I think healthy people have some vulnerability. Obviously, we all have some vulnerability, but I just don't think it's a little too emphasized. Something artificial about that, and I think it sort of smacks of the exaggeration we see in the ideal of the super compassionate. Because to be quite honest, I challenge anybody who thinks they're super compassionate. Okay, anybody who thinks they are super compassionate, anybody who seems like they're super compassionate. Okay, I think there is some narcissism involved in that. There's some enacting, some performance into the expected, and some, in some sense, trying to be like living into being a champion. Like a champion, superstar or whatever. I think there is a narcissistic dimension to that. And I think that actual emotions are more quiet and not so showy. Okay. I think real emotions are not a performance. All right. And I think we need to understand these things as we approach the true recovery, which is not a performance of healthiness. Okay. The true recovery is emotional sobriety. Okay. It's the exact opposite of performing. Okay. It's actually just being, having just real experience. Okay. So, you know, I don't know how to say it any better, but I just think that, unfortunately, and I'm sorry it's like this. I wish it wasn't like this. I wish I could say something else. But I think from what I've seen, and I've paid a lot of attention, I've paid way lots of attention. And I've had psychologists and I've had psychiatrists. My mom is a psychiatrist, okay? I've lived with it. I've been around all her friends who are psychiatrists. I've gotten personally familiar. I've known so many psychiatrists, psychologists in my lifetime, friends of my mom. I've known professors of, even famous, almost famous professors, in the world of art therapy, psychiatry, psychology, psychoanalysis. I've met psychoanalysts that have known some of the old psychoanalysts, Um, so like, I'm sorry, but I've been around this stuff, and I do think there is narcissism. Sorry, a lot of narcissism in the world of psychology. I think it's a very narcissistic subculture that has turned into like a school of academics, you know. And so, unfortunately, the institution that houses our supposed recovery and has almost jurisdiction, even in some cases, almost legal jurisdiction over our recovery, and even over the orthodoxies, so that some people would listen to me and think that this guy is just being like a bad person, like, because I'm saying a bunch of bullshit, because I haven't read the books and blah, 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 or whatever. But the bottom line is that may be all true. I may be a little bit of a hack, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not trained, but I really do think there is a lot of narcissism in the world of psychology. I'm sorry, I'm telling you what I think. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and you can just disagree. It's just a voice, but I do believe that. And I've been around a lot of psychiatrists, a lot of psychologists, and yes, some of them are more authentic than others. Okay, so let's just be honest. I've met some psychiatrists that are much more authentic than others. Okay, some are pretty sane. But some, I think, are in the narcissism, the confusion between the ideal, okay, of the almost like the idealized, vulnerable, super compassionate, almost like the champion emotional superstar, kind of like almost like a champion, almost like the way the Catholics have their saints, it's almost like the Mother Teresa, kind of like the ideal, Um, I think some of them are confused between that, and I think they don't like actual emotional sobriety. I think some of them are uncomfortable with that because I think it kind of takes away their bottle. Okay, and it's like, oh, I can't wear diapers and have my bottle, and now I have to just be this truly vulnerable person. Okay, because when you take away your bottle and you take away your diapers, okay, and you take away all the hugs and the flowers, and you take away all the gushing and the wonderful, oh, how wonderful this compassionate person and this celebration, okay, and you're just naked in the world, just dealing with the competition of having to earn a living, and maybe the difficulty it is to maintain any relationship in this world, okay, and the fact that there is real insecurity in the world, not the, oh, I feel insecure, so I get a prize, I get a gold medal of insecurity because I feel so insecure. There is real insecurity in the world. There are people who go to work, and they have to bust their ass doing their Uber driving, and maybe two different part-time jobs, or they have a crappy ass, middle class job working in some Amazon factory or some boring ass job. They're not gushing with this like performance of insecurity, or this almost like enactment of insecurity, like, oh, I'm feeling insecure now. They are insecure, okay, because they're just one paycheck away of maybe having trouble paying for like a hospital, some hospital care, or maybe they have kids where they're really scratching their head, like, how's this kid going to go to college? He's going to have to get a scholarship or whatever. I mean, just like real life issues. Those are the real insecurities, okay. And of course, like, I'm not saying there isn't something good about people who are able to feel insecure, but by itself, what do you just get a prize for being insecure? I mean, you're gonna have to get out there. It's nice to, yeah, I guess there is something cool about being insecure, I guess, because at least that's, maybe you have a little more awareness, maybe, or you're not so defended or whatever. But I mean, in the real world, um, you know, I don't know. I guess in the real world, insecurity is real. It's not just something you feel. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes our feeling states are almost like theatrical states, and yeah, I understand. Like, I have felt insecure in my life, so I'm like, believe me, I'm not pretending like I don't know what it's like. Okay, I have felt insecure, but a lot of my insecurity that I felt, and that has, I've even had panic disorder. Okay, I've had panic disorder. I had a panic attack last night. I have probably a lifetime I'll have anxiety disorders, panic. So I'm not pretending I don't know what it's like. Okay, I know what it's like. But I also feel like a lot of the insecurity I have is not like to get a gold medal. It's not like, oh wow, insecurity. This is a precious, wonderful thing. He's now vulnerable. He has this sacred vulnerability. In the real world, you don't get anything for that. I mean, I don't know. I think, and I'm not saying we should be like super tough or whatever. I mean, it's tough to have insecurities, but I'm just saying that I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I get the idea. There is a confusion in the world of psychology about the sacred status of vulnerability and being super compassionate, and I just believe that the real prize, let's say, the real prize of life is the real emotionality, the real insecurity, the real courage to get out there and do the real hard work, which is to actually maintain relationships, not get fired, actually have a long-lasting success. I guess just providing for your family, or being even part of the community, and just not necessarily performing how sacredly wonderful you are with your emotions. You know, I think a lot of that is performative. Um, and yeah, or for those of us out there that really honestly have like these kind of more infantile feelings, like I honestly do have these. I cry and I have these feelings. And okay, but what do you want a prize for that? I mean, you want a gold medal or something? It's like, just okay, so you have your feelings, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to put you down for it. Go ahead, have it. It's like, but what? I mean, so what? So you have your feelings. I mean, I just think, you know, bottom line, maybe we don't know. Maybe it's because you're not grown up. Maybe grown-ups don't have those kind of feelings, or they're, I don't have a simple answer. I think at this point I probably am going to piss people off. I'm sorry, and again, on the flip side of it, you guys could probably tell that I do have a lot of feelings. I mean, I have panic attacks. I've had anxiety all my life. Um, you know, I've had long COVID. Long COVID. I've had myocarditis. I mean, can you imagine what it's like to have? I'm sure some of you have had long COVID. You know what it's like to have your heart beating weird. And doctors not being able to tell you really what's going on. It's a terrible feeling. Um, I've had whole ranges of emotions my whole life. I've had times where I've cried my eyes out, like a baby. Just so I'm with all of you guys. Like I've had days where I cried my eyes out. I've had days where I've had very deep feelings. I cried over other people in certain situations, and I'm not putting it down. I mean, humans do have emotions. So like, I'm not saying we don't. I'm saying, I'm just saying I don't know that it's like a sacred status. I mean, I think, now I do agree. I mean, there is such a thing as bullshit. There is such a thing as bullshit. There is such a thing as not owning your shit. Okay. There is such a thing as not plugging into all the things that are actually in your environment. Okay. There are people who seem very peaceful because they're not plugged into all the issues in their environment, in their family, in their neighborhood. Okay, in the actual political space that they occupy. There are people that they walk into a store and they're going to end up stealing something, and they're not really thinking about all the issues that are in play. Like, this is a society that I live in. What would happen if everybody just stole something? They're not really thinking about all those things. They're sort of taking the clutter out of their minds so they don't have to think about all the things, and they're just making life very simple for themselves. So there's a lot of people who seem very peaceful because they just don't take on the burden of everything around them. And they make really stupid decisions and they do really stupid things, because they're not taking in all the factors of life. Um, so there is bullshit out there, and there are people who just can't take the burden of dealing with all the factors of life experience. So that does happen, and they may seem very peaceful at times. At times, but I think, what can I say? I mean, so I guess I don't. It's like, I just don't know what to say, honestly. I mean, I just so but to me, the answer to all these questions is not like I need to go to the sacred place where I'm having all my wonderful emotions. I mean, look, if you have emotions, you've got them. Okay, congratulations. If you're a person who doesn't have a lot of emotions, don't worry about it. You know, don't worry about it. Focus more on the bullshit. You know, I think we'll do much better if you're like a person who just doesn't have a lot of feelings. The idea is not to go try to imitate or open up yourself to find a place where you got all these feelings. I mean, that may be wasted energy. Probably what you should be doing, if you really want to be better, maybe it's just explore, where is there bullshit in my life. Where am I not plugging into all the things that really matter in my environment? You know, how can I pay more attention to the people around me and what's important to them? And if I don't have any friends, how could I maybe plug into my community where I could maybe start doing what I probably don't want to do, which is maybe get some boring ass job, and God, I'm sorry to say that. Maybe find the best job you can find. If there's like 5 jobs available in your neighborhood, find the best one so you don't at least don't have to have the worst job, but find some job where you can start helping out. And don't think of the job as a way to make money so much as a way to help out with some business, even if it's a bullshit business, but you are helping a team, you know and just kind of get more plugged into the environment around you, and just get more plugged into what's concerning to, let's say, your neighborhood. And if your neighborhood is an anonymous neighborhood where nobody cares about anybody, well, that's part of the sickness of our world, So it's, the environment doesn't necessarily help us out, but I don't know, maybe just get plugged in more to the ugliness of the world, just get plugged in more and don't try to like react to it. Just feel how bad it is to recover your actual emotions in real world. Don't unplug from the reality around you, or re-plug in maybe slowly, but get more into the reality and feel more, But, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm telling people to just be tough, because I don't think that's what I'm saying. I think it sounds like that, okay? And that's the thing. It sounds like I'm saying just be tough. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying plug into the ugliness around you and let it weigh on you. Okay, that's not being tough. That's actually being more vulnerable. You know what I mean? That is actually exposing more of yourself. You know, really plugging into all the things around you, all the issues that we rather tune out of. You know, tune into things and get involved. Oh, but that turns my stomach. Yeah, do it. That's not being tough. That's actually going through the pain. And that's not toughness. That's actually being more vulnerable in a way, but that's real vulnerability. Okay, that's not this thing of, oh, I'm feeling vulnerable. I'm feeling vulnerable. It's like, it's almost like a cat that wants to be pet. It's like, that's kind of cool. I mean, maybe there's a place for that. But if you want to have real vulnerability, why don't you do a lot of things that make you uncomfortable? I mean, to a point, like maybe like everything in cluster B is in small doses. So maybe just dosify, just doses, but just slightly living, slightly uncomfortable, maybe having kind of a regular structure. Oh, I don't want to do that. Yeah, of course you don't want to do that. But I'm not saying be tough. I'm saying go into the outside the comfort zone. Okay. Outside the comfort zone is being truly vulnerable. Okay. So it's kind of like the difference between the way we idealize things in the therapy session. Oh, we're feeling love now. This is vulnerability. It's like go and really be vulnerable, and really do things that are uncomfortable. Oh, it's really uncomfortable. Yeah. Well, maybe go in small steps, And I guess for those of us that are so that have I've had this too. Like I've had times in my recovery where I wasn't even able to go work at McDonald's. Okay, there have been times. Okay, and I don't know what to say. I mean, I have how would you say? I guess I have a lot of respect for those people because I've been there too. I've had to have that period where I've gone through periods where I wasn't ready to have a job. I really was not ready to have a job. Okay, and that is also being vulnerable, by the way. Even though a doctor might have said, well, you're not vulnerable. It's like, yeah, I was pretty vulnerable. I couldn't even work, you know. But, how did I get from there to being able to work? I mean, I don't know. I do feel bad, for those people. But, somehow, there's something deep inside of us that wants to survive. And I think even people who are at the lowest low, I think there's something deep down inside that just knows they have to get back into the real world, some way or another, and slowly, slowly they go back, and they integrate, into the real world. And we talk about all this psychological stuff on the couch, like how am I going to integrate this and integrate that? Maybe by integrating into the real world, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, but I don't know. I mean, maybe it doesn't look ideal, but sometimes the answer is not a sushi. Sometimes the answer is not a souffle or like some kind of Michelin 5-star. Sometimes the answer is a bologna sandwich. You know, sometimes the answer is a fucking bologna sandwich and a used car. You know, in an average neighborhood. I mean, all these things sound like it's like putting water on a possessed person. It's like these are drops of holy water just going to burn my skin. You know, I just said bologna sandwich, used car. You know, but sometimes the answer is just that plain vanilla, boring ass day to day ham sandwich, bologna sandwich existence. You know, and just some job, and there you'll find so many vulnerabilities. You'll be in a gold mine of vulnerability. You know, you'll have more vulnerability than you'll have a reservoir and bottomless pit of vulnerability. You know, and if that's so special, well then go have it. Go have the vulnerability if you can handle it. You know, some of us can't work yet. You know, and that's terrible. And I would say I would even pray like because I've been there and I know that I was in a situation where I was even suicidal, you know? So like, I know how dangerous it is. And I know that maybe for a period, therapy would actually save those people. Okay. Because maybe they do need, here I'm contradicting myself, but they would need a little bit of reparenting, maybe just to calm them down, you know, just to give them that little bit of artificial confidence to get back somehow in the real world, you know? So sometimes you even have to go through bullshit something to get yourself back in that world. But you know, I think the real prize, you know, I'd say the real gold, you know, the real treasure is just the bologna sandwich, used car, miserable, you know, unthinkable routines where we're like really triggered into all of our despair, you know, and really just taking on the feelings, you know. You think it's too much, you think this is just unbearable, and try to bear the unbearable, you know. Try to unbear the unbearable. Just like, you know, it's not being a tough person if suddenly you stop smoking cigarettes or stop drinking coffee. That's not being tough. That is actually bringing out more vulnerability to work with in your life, you know. And I'm sure a lot of people, I'm sure everything I've said has just been basically like just shitting all over this video. Like I've just been putting like acid, you know, just throwing acid. But, you know, we are free in our lives to experiment with a lot of things, you know, and we can experiment even with the bologna sandwiches, you know, we can even, you know, we can do those things, you know, we can just go out there and stretch ourselves outside the comfort zone and really take it on the unease of it, the unease, you know. And I think we'll just be growing a heart, is what we'll do. We'll grow a real heart instead of the pedestal performance of the idealized, compassionate thing that, you know, that I've seen in all my mom's friends and all her world, you know, of psychology. And I'm sorry I have to sound like that. You know, I don't want to sound like that, but you know, psychology has developed a kind of almost like a hegemony. They have developed a hegemony. They've developed kind of a monopolistic, jurisdictional domination, okay, of the world of mental health, you know. And so, you know, I'm sorry, but monopolies and their power is corrupting because power is corruption. You know what I mean? And I don't think we ever should have allowed the domain of our mental health to be in the hands of one subculture or just a limited sector of subcultures. I think there are a lot of subcultures out there that also have a lot to say about the human soul, okay, and what is the human heart. And I think there's a lot of narcissism out there. So, you know, if you're in a place where you really can't work and you're in a place where you are truly, you know, like disabled totally, you may need to go to therapy because that's all there is, you know, or you may maybe go find I would say substance abuse recovery or like a addictions recovery group because those also provide a lot of help, you know. Um, and yeah, there's narcissism out there, but you may need to go there anyway, even if there is narcissism in the recovery world, you know, because that may be the bridge. But you know, eventually, I challenge anybody once they get to a place where they're ready to think about it, you know, that maybe the real answer to all this is not the performative ideal of the performance of this great gushing vulnerable emotionality, but maybe the real answer could be something like emotional sobriety. Okay, and I really encourage people to think about what it means and meditate on what it means to be emotionally sober. I do encourage people to think about that. Even if they're going to reject it, just think about it. So thanks for watching.